this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate a refined method of working the cable cast on in the round. Now this video assumes that you already know how to work a standard cable cast on. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. So the first two stitches are the slip knot and knitting on. So those two stitches are different from the rest. They were created differently than the rest. This last one was created the same as the rest, but because it's the last stitch, it just kind of is pulled across the front of the work. It doesn't have this little cable at the base of the stitches. We're going to fix that later when we weave in the yarn tail. This is the side of the cast on that is facing you if you're going to knit flat, and this is the side that many people find is most attractive. If you look on the back side, the cast on looks similar, but it is a little different. You can see that you have sort of two offset horizontal strands for each cast on stitch instead of one longer sort of a diagonal strand. So for many people this is more attractive than this side. But every cast on method either creates new stitches on the left hand needle or on the right hand needle. So if you're knitting flat in a situation where you're putting new stitches on the left hand needle, then this edge of the cast on, the edge that's facing you as you're casting on, is going to face you in your first row of knitting. But when you knit in the round, when you join in the round, you have to have the stitches set up so that the needle with the yarn hanging from it, the working yarn, is in your right hand. So if you've done a cable cast on, that means that in order to join in the round, you've got this side that many people find less attractive facing you as you join in the round, and that is the side that's going to be facing you always, because that will be the right side. So what I'm going to show you is how you can work in the round instead with this more attractive side, if you feel that it's more attractive, with this side facing you, as well as dealing with how this stitch looks different and how these first two stitches were worked differently as well. So rather than turning the work and joining in the round right away, we're going to knit one row flat so that this edge remains facing us. So you're going to work it in the same pattern that you would work in the round. So if you were supposed to do knit 2, purl 2, you would still do knit 2, purl 2 for this first row. So I've worked my first row and I have those last two stitches left on the needle, and these are the two extras. These is that slip knot and the knitting on cast on that I used to work the very first two stitches. So I'm going to let them come off the needle, and now I'm going to release these stitches. Now if you're pulling on the yarn tail, it may just end up knotting everything up. So what you want to do is pull with your needle in order to release them. Sometimes if you keep your needle in place and you're pulling on the yarn tail instead, it will knot up. But this should release when you let those stitches off the needle. So now you're at the point where you have this nice edge of the cast on facing you, and all of the stitches are on the right hand needle, and the yarn is now on that right hand needle too. So now you can join in the round and have this edge facing you. And I can continue with the established stitch pattern, working whatever the stitch pattern should be for the second round. So now I've bound off, and I have my swatch, and you can see I've got that nice cable edge all the way around. And then I have this little gap here where the yarn tail is hanging. This is that first stitch that I worked. Remember how that first, the last stitch that was cast on is kind of stranded across the front, and it pulls across, and you don't have the same single strand going across the base of it. So if you follow this first column of stitches here, you can see how this one is the stitch that was the last stitch that was cast on. It's kind of pulling to the left, and you can see it comes, and it's almost as if there's another stitch right below it right here, that there's these two strands right here. So you want to bring the yarn that's attached over out of the way here while you insert your needle through those 2 strands that are attached to that knit stitch at the base of the column. So you've captured those 2 strands on your needle, and you pull the yarn tail through. So if I pull on this, you can see where I've created that strand across the gap. So now we need to weave this yarn tail in on the back side. So I'm just going to bring it under these 2 purl bumps right here. Pull it through, and then I just want to make sure that I keep my tension correct so that it matches. I can go back on the reverse side, and now I can use this yarn tail. I can go up the legs, the right leg of each of these knit stitches on the back. As far up as I need to. Again, maintaining the tension, and I can come around the back side of that knit stitch, and then I can bring the needle through a few legs coming down the other way. You don't want to go too far. You don't want to cut the tail close to the edge where it can be seen. So I don't want to go all the way to the edge, because I'm going to be snipping this yarn tail and I don't want it to poke through and be visible on the right side of the work. So the edge matches really well here. So as a comparison between the method I just showed you here, where you have the consistency of the stitches along the edge, here is a swatch that I used using the standard method of the cable cast on. So it casts on exactly the number of stitches I needed. I turned the work so that the yarn was hanging from the right hand needle when I joined in the round. So I have the edge that some knitters don't like as much showing on the right hand side. And then you can see where those first 2 stitches are formed with the slip knot and the knitting on. You get kind of a set of extra bumps all at the base of this first stitch, which is pretty enlarged. It looks kind of like a hole. And then at the other end, where you had that last stitch that didn't look as good as the rest of them because there was no strand going across, you have some discontinuity among the stitches along the edge. So you can weave this tail in and get a fairly straight edge looking, but it's not going to be as perfect as the method that I just showed you. Technique refinements are just that, refinements. Each refinement makes a subtle improvement to your projects that on their own might not be noticed. But as you accumulate these refinements and combine them together within a single project, the total effect can be significant. If you like this video, you might enjoy this one here on a jogless cast on in the round using the long tail cast on, or this one here on a jogless finish when binding off in the round. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.